Hey guys, how's it going? Today we are back with another hand review that was posted on our private Discord group. And today we want to talk at some strong post-flop lines and how to avoid huge mistakes in a big pot multi-way. So yeah, let's get into the action.
All right, so yeah, 1-2 game here, or a 2-2, I guess. Pretty big open size, but maybe it's standard for the game. Yeah, all games are different, so it's whatever. And then yeah,
You also
V2.
don't mind the bigger open when the game plays actually a little bit bigger. Like you mentioned, sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 20. So it really depends on the game, and I think more on how much the players are playing, right? Is everyone buying in for 400, 600, 1K, or more like 100, 200, 300? And who's playing? So yeah, given that we still play a lot out of position, I also don't mind a smaller raise size. Even when all the other players go like 15, 20, it's still fine to open to 10 or 8 because we don't mind playing multi-way. And when the table is super loose, you're not folding out too many hands anyway. So I think raising bigger than 10 is usually not necessary in those games. I mean, of course, here with queens, different scenario when you say, well, they are calling anyway, going bigger with queens as an exploit, so 15, 20. That's, of course, totally fine for me. So, yeah, we open, two players call, we are out of position, always sucks, right? And not the best board texture. What do you think we can do on this texture? Because it's not the best one, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can go either way, like either bet or check. If I bet, I wouldn't bet too big, somewhere between like 30 and 50% pot, I think, being out of position. Um, But checking's totally fine here too, because as you say, like the board's not very good. It's going to be pretty tough to play future streets, so we don't mind just keeping the pot fairly small. And our hand, it does need some protection, but it's still pretty strong, So it's not like a disaster when it checks through. There's going to be a lot of different cards we can keep betting on the turn. So I think either way really depends. If I knew these guys were like super aggressive and spewy, I think I actually prefer a check and then to go for like a huge check raise, and maybe just try to get the money in on the flop because you're going to play against, some players are just like never going to fold a pair, 10x or big draws. So if you have any type of read where, yeah, you have somebody who's pretty spewy and aggressive, it's always not a bad idea just to like give them a bit of rope and then go for the big check raise. And if they have it, they have it. You get stacked sometimes, but you're also just going to stack them a ton when they overplay their hands.
Yeah, I agree. Good
So
option. And also, when we think about our range, this board is definitely pretty bad because we have to check so many hands, right? We have so often a hand like an under pair. We have often ace x, right? Ace x spades or something like this. We have ace king, ace queen, ace jack, all those hands. And with those hands, we definitely want to check fold. So having some hands to check raise or check call is mandatory. And when you play against two solid opponents, definitely fine to check range when you have not such a good idea how polarized you want to be. So checking will never be a mistake on this texture. Let's see what Hero did here.
yeah, so he went ahead and bet, which is fine. Um, One fold, button calls. So yeah, I mean we're feeling pretty good about our hand. He didn't raise. Yeah, it seems
Yeah,
like a pretty good
so
spot where we can gear up for.
when when he's not raising, we can definitely eliminate a lot of strong hands, right?
Yeah, for sure. We can definitely triple this board on like. Yeah, I mean it has to run out pretty well. That's the problem too with always betting is that like a board like this, it has to run out pretty well to get like good solid triple off.
Yeah.
Obviously if people are pretty call happy, you can do it more, but if you're playing against fairly reasonable players, like it can become pretty tough. So always just think about being out of position is never a bad idea to pot control for sure. But again, it's totally fine too. Yeah, turns a 9. What do you think here? It's not the greatest card, but it's not like the worst card either. So what do you think?
Yeah, exactly. It's not the best card, but he should also not have too many 9x hands. I mean, he can have like 8, 9, ace 9, maybe king 9 suited, queen 9 suited, jack 9 suited. That's probably about it. And besides that, he will still have a ton of draws, right? Has like king jack, queen jack, 7, 8, diamonds. So yeah, I'm still feeling pretty good about my hand. What do you think? What we should do on the turn? Should we continue betting, check call, check raise?
Yeah, again, I think all options are fine. I wouldn't. I mean, I guess check raise I wouldn't necessarily do because you can still have 9x. But I think either
Yeah,
betting or checking is fine. And I think actually on this card, we can definitely get it. I think we can triple. If the river's like say 3 of hearts, I think if you go like half pot turn, and then like half pot or 2/3 on river, I think you should be able to get 3 streets of value here. It's going to be fairly thin, but it's not out of the question at all. So
No, I agree. Because on the turn, he's still calling draws, right? He's still calling all the flush draws basically in position. He's calling all the 10x. And as we mentioned on the flop, we can eliminate a ton of strong holdings on the flop. Because when he has pocket 4s, pocket 9s, pocket 10s, or 10-9, he's always raising flop against our small sizing. No way he's calling. So his range is definitely somewhat capped. And when he just calls turn, we can also eliminate a lot of strong 9x, because when he has a strong 9, he's probably raising like ace 9, king 9. So if he just calls turn, I feel really, really good about my hand. And on a brick on the river, I definitely like the tripling idea with pocket queens here.
Yeah,
and we also have no diamond, so he has more diamonds because we have no diamond in our hand.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we can always check call the river too, as an option too, especially against more aggressive players. Like, I think in these games, it's going to be usually better just to, like, as you say, like triple for value, because the EV of like checking and trying to trap isn't always so great in these games because players just don't bluff enough, so they just give up. But if if the guy's a decent player, or you have some type of read again that he's like pretty aggressive or something, it's a really good spot as well to like maybe check river, just because we unblock a lot of his draws and just go for a nice check call. So I think either option.
Okay, let's see what hero did. And yeah, we bet again. And as mentioned, that's totally fine. He's polarizing on the turn, also likes the sizing.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good sizing, like half pot or so. I wouldn't want to go too big, because then it's just like you kind of, narrowing his range down a bit more to 9x, and then like his strongest draws. Whereas this can, like, especially in these games, like players could continue to like pocket 8s type hands or like gutters and stuff, right? You never know. So
yeah, calling ranges are way wider than online, and he raises. Yeah, fun spot is the wrong word.
Yeah, for sure.
So definitely a dicey situation. And we have to think about what he's trying to tell, right? Of course, he's trying to tell us he has a 9. And now it's on us to think about if this is a valid line and what bluffs he could actually have. Yeah, do you think this is a line that is often used as a bluff? And if yes, which bluffs do you think he can have?
No, I mean, obviously he could have a lot of draws, but I think the reality is in these games, people just don't take this line, from my experience and from yours as well, right? At all with like bluffs. It's more, they're going to do a lot more racing on the flop with their bluffs, and also the fact
this
that
is
we
the
bet
point.
Twice into two players. It's like our range looks pretty damn strong, and then he's still raising. I think people just play their hands pretty face up here, and yeah, I would definitely be really worried. It's a really shit spot, obviously, because it's like, you have a pretty good overpair. It's, it's not a huge raise, but at the same time, it's just like it's a tough spot to play out of position here in these type of pools, again, because people they play so face up, especially when they're raising non-all in on the turn. It's like one of the strongest lines. Yeah,
I agree. And the problem is we are playing still effectively for 200 big blinds. And if we call turn and the river bricks, it will be really, really hard to get away from our hand. Of course, it's wrong that when we always call the turn, we have to call river. This is obviously wrong. But in this case, it's definitely true, right? When the river bricks and we still think he has enough bluffs in his range, we have to call river. And you rarely see those 200 big blind crazy bluffs on the turn. And as mentioned, if he raises flop, bets turn, bets river, I'm not folding, right? We still have queens. He can still have a bunch of draws. I'm calling down. This is out of the question most of the time against an unknown. But when we think he raises most draws on the flop, I mean, we can definitely agree that he's raising all his combo draws, right? Like queen jack diamonds and 7-8 diamonds and jack 8 diamonds and stuff. He's always raising flop. So he needs to raise turn with a hand like a random diamond draw or 7-8. And in reality, this never happens. Those hands call or fold on the turn. I would say, the vast majority of the time, those hands call turn and play according to the river card. But you basically never see a draw raising on the turn when they not raise flop. This is a problem from my experience as well in most 2-5 games, and especially on lower stakes. People are even more passive. So, problem here is that we see a 9 way too often. And we have no idea what we should do on the river, right? Because even on a blank, we hate getting stacks in. But we have to, because when we give him enough draws on the turn, he is probably continuing with enough draws on the river that we have to call down. We have not invested too much money, so we can still go ahead and fold. This would be the cheapest option in my eyes.
Yeah, I think it's fair. It's a really tough fold, but I definitely agree because in this hand, it was also versus an unknown. If you have history with the player, if he's like a good regular, you want to be pretty careful because otherwise he could exploit you pretty badly, by raising everything and you just fold. Not everything, but if you raise a lot and you're just overfold in turn. But I think here again, versus an unknown, this line's just so strong. And then as you say, like we're gonna kind of have to call the river because if you just call turn and hope he gives up, then that's okay, I guess. But he's probably gonna bluff through a lot. If he's just the type of player to bluff draws on the turn, he's gonna fire through a lot on the river. So, and then at that point, you're kind of playing a guessing game as to like which, if the river's a total brick, of course it's easier. But obviously, there's gonna be a lot of rivers where a lot of draws missed, but some draws hit, right? So then you're gonna kind of have to call anyways, right, and play a guessing game.
Yeah, completely agree. So let's see what happened.
Yeah.
Did he fold on the turn?
No, so he
Okay,
calls,
so
and
we continue.
another point too is that obviously we want to think if we dominated value, which I think in this case I don't really think so because like the one hand I could think of would be like pocket jacks, which could potentially play this way, but it would make more sense for him to do raise it on the flop, I think, or pre-flop. Obviously, squeezing is way more standard. So that's why, like as you were saying, if he raised flop and then went bet, I think in that scenario, I think we actually dominate value more because he could be a random player doing it with like ace 10 or jacks. Taking that line. But I think when he calls flop and raises turn versus double barrel, it's just much less likely that he has a value hand that we dominate. So there's that too. And then the river. The river's pretty bricky. I mean, obviously the club draw gets there, but that's not. If he has draws, this is the problem, right? Like calling turn to fold river is. I think if I call turn there, I'm probably just calling the river because, enough like straight draws and diamond draws missed.
Yeah, he should not have too many clubs. I mean, which clubs could he raise turn? I mean, it's so hard to raise a hand like King Jack or Ace 3 in clubs or Ace Deuce on clubs in the turn, right? Because with those hands, you don't want to raise full your equity on the turn. So, those hands will peel turn basically always. And of course, he has to call flop, right? So, rarely a hand is continuing on the flop and raising turn. So, for me, it's a total brick. Not a total brick, but it's one of the better cards for sure. So like you mentioned, when we call turn, we should definitely continue river and look him up. And if we are so unsure, I really prefer folding turn. And I would also suggest this to you guys. Think about player pool tendencies. Which hands do you usually see at showdown? Do you see enough bluffs? Do you see a hand like King Jack sometimes at showdown on this type of board texture, or do you always see 9x or a slow played hand?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a good spot. And I mean, I think, looking at it, obviously he could have clubs. He can definitely float with like some backdoor club draws and then raise turn. But again, it's just, I definitely agree. Like just getting away on the turn is totally fine unless you have like really reads on the player, because these pools are just way too passive. People do not bluff enough in these type of lines. They bluff in like say triple barrel sometimes, like single raise pot, right, where it's easy. It's easy to bluff in those hands because you're not risking much money. But you don't really see players like call flop multi-way raise turn jam river as a bluff a ton, in these type of games for like 200 big. So just keep that in mind until you get some reads. It's totally fine to play like pretty snug. And that's actually that's the best way to exploit the pool. Is to like realize they're not bluffing a ton, and just to make a lot of folds. And then if you want to bluff them a lot, if you find that they're folding a lot, then you can go ahead and do that. But you don't want to be the one making like, the loose calls when people are just nowhere near, optimal bluffing ranges or whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So definitely think about how your player pool is playing and how you can exploit this player pool. So we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
And this was for A6 and
Mariana 5 for Raise Your Edge. All right, take it easy, guys.